Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. How is everyone doing? Sorry, I can't actually see anything at the moment. I have to go open up my source monitor still because stuff is going on with that. So let's just go to this. Here's my thing. Okay. 0 people watching. Oh, no. Oh, how many people are watching? Okay, well, I appear to be going out. That's the important part. 1 watching right now. Cool. Okay, that's probably me. All right. Oh, well, let me just see. Anyone else is going to show up? I don't know. I'm gonna start either way. So this is the spoiler stream, spoiling everything. I am going to go over everything and spoil it. Yeah, okay. So, I guess just to get started, the spoiling Chadwick Jones slash Dyercentral storyline. Um, just gonna say right off the bat, this might be a little confusing, and a little meandery and a little hard to understand because we've got stuff to go over as far as backstory, stuff to go over as far as current events that are going on in the timeline, and stuff that will go over as far as future stuff that was going to happen, and even some stuff in alternate timelines that's not happening anymore. So, uh, feel free if anyone ever decides to show up. Feel free to ask questions or clarifying statements or something, because yeah, there's quite a bit to clarify. Um, okay. Here's my notes. All right. Now I'm afraid I'm not going to show the notes on stream just because, well, guys gotta have some secrets, but mostly I don't want you to see just how god awful my notes are. They're kind of sporadic and all over the place. So I guess we'll just start with season 3, go through to season 5, and then talk about backstories, the many that will be, and then some potential future stuff that could have happened. So for each season, I kind of chose like a music theme that would go along with it. Um, if this were to have actually happened, I think I would have thrown that out of the way, just because it's not, just because my opinion on how to use music has changed. But I was planning on the theme for season 3 being sort of a Metal Gear style music stuff, sort of like at the very end of the season 2 finale. And that's just because I like I think music, like, obviously it shifts direction and stuff and it changes perspectives on different things. So yeah, I was styling this one around Metal Gear. Metal Gear. And yeah. Uh it's good. Another thing to point out, um uh a lot of this is very fan fiction-y. If it's not obvious by the fact that I'm playing like a Super Saiyan and my main enemy is a Time Lord, or one of my main enemies is a Time Lord, and all this other shit. A lot of this is very fan fiction-y, and I include a lot of, well, I steal a lot of stuff from other much better franchises. So you're gonna see quite a bit of that as well. So let's just go over some of the movies I was planning on going over in season 3. So Firestarter 2, um, The Black Hole, which is a new image picture. Minority Report. Not that Minority Report is that bad, but I had a pretty negative experience with it when I saw it in high school, so I think I thought I could squeeze a bit out of there. Um, Son of Aladdin, which is a Hindi animated film, which I might actually review in some other form at some point because I found it on Netflix and oh man, it makes me laugh. It came out in 2016, but it looks like the very first animated film or something, like what you would expect that to look like, very first CG animated film, I should say. Like Toy Story, the first one does look far, far cleaner than this. And it's just funny that it came out the same year as like Moana and Kubo and the Two Strings and shit. Like, um, like you can do better. But anyway, Elementary, which is a film I've been trying to find a copy of for years, but I've never been able to. I saw it on the Chiller channel a long time ago, and it's god awful, but in a fun way. And the creator has never, as far as I know, he's never released it in an official capacity. It's just been on Chiller, which is disappointing. Um, and in fact, if I start up a new show, I might consider just petitioning him and asking if he could send me some sort of copy to review. Um, that might take some doing though, because obviously I'm gonna make fun of it, but in a loving sort of way. I had a lot of fun when I watched that movie the first time. Um, Lucy, that one movie where Scarlett Johansson takes drugs and becomes God. Very fun stuff. Kronk's New Groove. Kronk's New Groove. Hercules in New York, very first Arnold Schwarzenegger film. Uh, Pixels. Uh, I think if you remember, I did a dire situation on Pixels, and I made a very dramatic show of adding it to the list of Chadwick Jones reviews stuff. So there you go. It's on the list, but Chadwick Jones ain't happening no more. Encino Man, uh, the movie I caught on Netflix. It's from the 80s. No, 90s. It's from the 90s, and it's about a caveman who wakes up in Encino, California, and it's so totally radical, bro. I need to work on my California voice. I've been out of touch for a while. Uh, bro. No, that's terrible. That's terrible. I should stop that. Parallels. Uh, movie's fucking bullshit. It was meant to be a series. Um, they, it's a pilot for a series, but they don't tell you that when they watch the movie. They present it like it's an actual movie, but it's just a pilot. Until you watch it, and then it builds up some intrigue and stuff. I'm like, whoa, where's this going? Oh, this is kind of cool. I want to see what's happening with this. What's going on? And then at the very end, it's just like, you'll find out later, but you never will. You never will. And it's not like when a movie ends kind of ambiguously and you're left to decide for yourself what happens. Like it's literally it's a TV show pilot. It totally blue balls you. Fuck that movie. Um, well, I guess fuck whatever uh, uh, channel decided not to pick it up, and fuck the producer who decided to try and recoup losses by selling it as a movie, because fuck you. Um, Worms? I, to be honest, I barely remember this. I think it's another animated film I saw on Netflix. It may or may not have something to do with the video game. I'm not sure. Oh, here's a fun one. The Jungle Book. Now you might ask, well, so the original or the live action one? Yes, and yes, and yes. This was meant to be like the focal point of the season, like the amazing video I put like a shit ton of effort into, and I just turn it into the most over the top crazy shit you've ever seen. Because basically, the premise of the video is that I review every single iteration of the Jungle Book in existence. The books, every movie adaptation, because there's dozens of them, TV shows, commercials, video games, all of it. I review all of it. Sort of like a Dragon Ball look back, but stylized a little better and in one review. Like, one review that would last like an hour and a half, but it would have like the production value of Pixies. Like, even more so than that. So that was meant to be like a magnum opus of season 3. If you remember, when I reviewed the Jungle Book movie, the live action one, there's a little bit at the end where I talk about where like I'm about to finish a review, and suddenly you hear what very clearly sounds like Chadwick Jones and Brain Surgeon walking in. That was a thing I filmed as sort of a tie-in, because at a certain point in this episode, well, actually, let me just describe how the episode is, because I have notes about it. So basically, the way that this whole thing works is that I start off reviewing some random Jungle Book movie, so probably one of the crappy Netflix ones. Then all of a sudden, the screen just glitches out, and I'm wearing a slightly different outfit, or the room looks slightly different, and I'm talking about a slightly different different Jungle Book adaptation. And this happens like a couple times, where it sticks to these two at first, but then it reveals that the Brain Surgeon has been experimenting with the TM quadruple T Addy Santis, and it's gone horribly wrong, and all the relative dimensions are starting to merge together. And like different versions of reality are coexisting in the same space, and it's all collapsing together, and it could be the end of everything, basically. So basically, what the Brain Surgeon comes up with as a way to stop this is that Chadwick Jones has to find the true version of the Jungle Book, the true version, the me who is reviewing the true version, kill him and take his place, because that is the only way you can survive this somehow. And it's meant to be absurd, obviously. So that's how we universe jump, and I'm reviewing every single Jungle Book movie in existence. Just jumping from universe to universe to universe, doing all these different Jungle Books. And I have a few notes in here, different things that could happen. So I find one version of Chadwick reviewing the commercials. He's wearing an I Donut Donuts t-shirt, like what the Nostalgia Critic wears in those commercial videos, and he's reviewing the certain Jungle Book commercials. And eventually they get into a conversation about like movie trailers somehow, and the version says, well, yeah, I love movie trailers. It's so great how they go over most of the movie, and you get a great taste of what you're about to see. It gets me so hyped. I sometimes like them a lot more than I like the movie. And R. Chadwick immediately kills him. Even though he's obviously not the original, he kills him just because, you have to. You can't let something like that exist. And yeah, at one point, like, they're trying to find what they deem Universe 1, which is the prime universe, the main universe, which is the real, quote unquote, real version of the Jungle Book. And well, I mean, and at one point they're as they're traveling through, they find a universe that's like really weird, and the censors bring it up as Universe 0, and that's the one where I'm doing the dire situation on that one movie. And I have a very meta conversation back and forth with them. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Oh, actually, I think I wrote a script for that. Let me see if I can bring up the script. Scripty, where are you? Oh yeah, and the video would have been called the Jungle Books Reviews. So yeah, I guess I'll play out these characters here. And until next time, I'm Glenn Dyer, and you interrupted by the sound of Chadwick and Surgeon coming into the dimension. So this is all the stuff you saw in that episode, by the way. the dire situation. What the hell? And that's of course when I turned off the camera. But or no, what what the hell? Yeah. Wow, this universe is really cramped. Excuse me, is this the main universe? The what? Hold on. Turns off camera. So obviously that's all the stuff you saw. And then I turn to them and I say, oh, okay, first of all, you interrupted my shoot. Second, what? According to the scanner, this is universe 0? That can't be right. What version of the Jungle Book are you reviewing, Chadwick? The shitty 2016 version. And I'm not Chadwick, I'm Glenn Dyer. The guy who made those top 5 worst movies list? How dare you? I love American Graffiti. He's no use to us. These readings suggest that if we kill him, the entire multiverse will be destroyed. We have to keep looking for Universe 1. Right. They disappear. And then I say, this is giving me an idea. So there you go. that's a live reading of a script that'll never happen. So yeah, that was something that was going to happen there. So yeah, at the climax of the disruption, the disruption's grown so powerful that more and more far out universes are coming in. So not just Jungle Books. So this will be like 5 minutes towards the end of the video. More and more non-Jungle Book stuff is merging together, including a universe that has suffered a horrible apocalyptic catastrophe due to the existence of Beneath the Mississippi 2. And I actually planned on paying homage or stealing or however you want to put it, a scene from the Star Trek: The Next Generations episode Parallels, where Worf is hopping between relative dimensions and stuff. There's one where there's like Enterprise that they encounter that's from a universe where the Borg have destroyed everything and just Riker and Worf are the only two left on the ship, and they're just desperate. So I plan on paying homage to that, where it's just like, Chadwick and some like horribly disheveled Chadwick and a brain surgeon. It's just like, you can't let me go back there, man. You can't let me go back. Beneath the Mississippi 2 has destroyed everything. So, but yeah, eventually, to be honest, I'm still not exactly sure what the one true Jungle Book was. I think I would have gone a little metaphysical with it, but eventually we fix it somehow, and it results in like a space rift going on in the area of the Mojave that I'm at, and that leads to further storylines. So I also plan that if Emperor Plagiarism of Miscellaneous fame has been bumped off of Mist by then, which, as I said in the last stream, Mist was planning on doing retiring the character. If he'd been bumped off Mist, then I would have inserted a little thing of how he got to Dyercentral, and it would be through this episode. And if not, it would be through the rift later on. But I actually wrote a little script for that too. So, and I put it in the Jungle Books reviews one. So, so let's do a live reading of that. So obviously, this will be happening as we're seeing the universe expand and all these different universes merging, and when they'll land in one that looks totally unfamiliar, and the plagiarism will come up, and he'll say, "Please, you have to help me. Mist went completely over the edge after he reviewed Hanukkah at Bubby's too." And then Mist walks down the hallway doing The Shining. He's basically being the Shining character, so we're doing that. Oh God, I gotta remember my Mist voice. It's a little higher pitched. Don't worry, Emperor Plagiarism. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your fucking brains in. He's like running around with an axe. And that they have like a tense thing where they're hiding, and eventually Chadwick Jones saves them from there. The like that Mist either dies or he goes completely insane. But yeah, they save Emperor Plagiarism. Emperor Plagiarism lives, and he says, Do you think there will be a place for me at Dyercentral? Of course, buddy. Hell, you could even get a job here if you want to help out with the cause. Good, good. Do you have any openings for a shadowy puppet master who talks about antagonists? Well, we did, but that job has been taken by Mr. Rancher. Mr. Rancher, boy, howdy. We do want some more though. You could work your way up. I suppose it will do. But know this, one day the Sith will rule the galaxy. That's nice. so, so that's how that happens. So I plan to just have him be a recurring character, sort of like mailroom and all that. But funny thing is, I also planned like a future storyline where just over time, like you can see he gets out of the mailroom at a certain point. He starts upgrading, starts finding more stuff. Like he comes from mailroom to like delivery boy to like a few things above that, to guard to a little bit above that. Let me see if I can actually find that. My notes are disconnected, but let me see if I can find where where that's happening. But at a certain point, he actually does get the shadowy puppet master position that he wanted. We start seeing stormtroopers in the background every now and then. There's TIE fighters and Star Destroyers and AT-ATs all around in the desert. Nobody mentions them, nobody talks about them, but you just see them every now and then. They start popping up in greater numbers. Everyone's totally unaware of what's going on. At a certain point, like during the review, Chadwick gets a mission to take back some plans that some folks stole. So he puts on a space helmet that looks exactly like a Darth Vader helmet, and it's like, oh man, I hate wearing this thing, and it hinders my breathing. Oh god. And he puts it on, that kind of thing. So yeah, he flies out into space, and it literally just has a Darth Vader Leia thing going on with somebody. I know you have those plans. God damn, it's hard to breathe. And yeah, all this stuff is happening. Doesn't doesn't seem to notice what's going on at all. But eventually something stupid catches him on to what's happening, and Chadwick literally solves it in like a few minutes. Like literally almost immediately, the Star Destroyers and stuff are gone, and CJ and Emperor Plagiarism is expelled from the base, and all this. it's just solved like comically fast. That's basically that one. Which, yeah, as I said, very kind of fan fictiony, but also amusing and I'll add more to it for now. And let's see. So, other movies. All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. Fuck that movie. Agent Fox, or Agent FOX. It's a Chinese animated film. It's going to have a running gag where I'm searching for Chinese propaganda, communist propaganda, I should say. The Adventures of Food Boy. It's gross. The Time Meddler / the Daleks Master Plan. Those are the Doctor Who episodes with the meddler in it, or the meddling monk, I should say. So I'd be tying that into the meddler's character. Devil's Pass, which is a really shitty horror movie. I might talk about that at some other point. Dragon Ball Xenoverse, my very first game review of Chadwick Jones. Plot of that one is that Chadwick would have been summoned into the game against his will by Shenron. Like, that's what happens in the plot of the game. You get summoned basically against your will into existence. And just review the game from the inside out. I do reactions from my Chadwick Jones character. I actually built a character who I call him Chadwick Jones, and I made him look as close to Chadwick Jones as the engine would allow. So, Guardian of the Highlands. It's a Scottish animated film, and it has Sean Connery in it. It's really bizarre. The Assassin's Creed live action film. I have a note to involve Alex in some way or another. The Last Legion. I don't think I've seen that. The Jetsons meet the Flintstones because there's some pretty bizarre moments in there that I could really rag on. The VHS trilogy, I only saw the first one, but I kind of hated it, so I thought I'd do a review on there. The Vampire's Assistant, which, goddamn, that was a terrible. And, the movie was very obviously just trying to capture like the Twilight slash I don't even know Harry Potter ground, like trying to do a hybrid between them, and like the books are not either of those in any way. So it just came out like really terrible from an adaptation standpoint. I was definitely going to rag on it for that. Okay. Reviews of season 3. Now we're going to get into the story. Now, I'm going to be first to point out season 3 has a problem with its story and the fact that it has way too goddamn much, and I'm still not sure how on earth I would have put all this in there, and it probably would have resulted in a lot of cuts or spreading it out into further seasons or something like that. Because with this season I was going to try and accomplish two mutually exclusive things, which was have episodes that don't have story in it at all, have episodes for the sake of having an episode, and also fit more story into this season than ever before. So it would have been either gargantually long or I would have failed at one of the tasks, and I have no idea which I would have gone with. So anyway, I have a thing describing the planning a film. I could describe that to you guys later. I have some concept art that I'll show you in a while after I've gone over some of the things that I've planned on happening. So I noted it will be the episode after Pixies. Dyer is found after escaping from the Panther prison. So he basically what happened to him is that after he was hit with that bullet, he survived. He's alive, and the entire time. And eventually he wakes up and he has a sort of Ace Ventura, Jim Carrey-ish thing where he's escaping from prison in like the gown and just he escapes. That's because obviously there's less guards on him. He's been in a coma this whole time. And he eventually escapes. So in episode 2, we find him afterwards. So we probably would have shown this escape at some other point. Exactly where he is, where he's hanging out because of other stuff that I can spoil to you in a little bit. Main thing, but I'll explain that more deeply later. He knows exactly where he is. So Chadwick goes to pick him up, and he's basically going to be a catalyst for the events of the season, because Dyer obviously knows where the prison is and that's going to be the main focal point. They can't really make any moves because they know that they have prisoners, that Panther has prisoners, and they could be in danger if they did anything. So the main task at the moment is freeing the prisoners so that they can do something a little more drawn out. And Dyer is the catalyst for that. And he was also going to help in the fact that he has no idea what any of this stuff is, what the base is, anything like that. So he'll be sort of the sounding board for like ideas and stuff without it sounding like too much like exposition. When the plot demands it, have a new program be turned on, finishing a story about the meddler, who obviously has gone missing because Chadwick kidnapped him and threw him into the brig. The picture of him will have a caption saying famed director missing, presumed dead. And John Gilbert will, of course, be the one doing the piece, and he'll be just finishing it, and he'll be saying, the planned all-female remake of Battleship Potemkin has since been put on hold. And then he'll move on to another story important to the plot. So whatever that story might be, it would probably be something about Panther stepping up its game or something like that. So, Marvin's eye patch. What happened to Marvin's eye, if you were ever concerned? The answer is absolutely nothing. He wears it because it looks intimidating, it looks cool. Um, the that was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. And Marvin will say, and point, are you a fan of the Angels? Pointing at his bandana. And I'll say, who are the Angels? So both both of them come from the same same tank in that sense. Well, I suppose they are brothers, although there's a bit more too. I'll get into that in a little bit. Um, uh, so I can't cut all of the side characters from the end of season 2. So even the people you didn't see, like Meridale and whatnot, they were captured. So I'm charged with interviewing all of them, and of course they frustrate him to no end. And I note that they eventually wear him down into a trembling mess because of their stupidity. So they have each character has a different number on their jumpsuit. I don't think I represented that in Pixies because I didn't have time to put the insignias on all of them. But each person has a different number. So Henry Hippie has the number 420. Duh. Meridale is 666. Dyer, before he escapes, is 24601. Old Man Dyer's number is actually so long that it wraps around the side of him. So obviously he's super fucking old. And that's all the numbers I have noted down for now. But yeah, they have different things going on with them. The main thing going on with Henry Hippie is that he doesn't have easy access to drugs in that prison. So he's suffering from major withdrawal effects, and he's just shouting and really pissed off all the time and going through like mood swings and all this sort of stuff. Meridale obviously is insane and crazy and uh, uh, murderous and and freaks him out that way. And Old Man Dyer is Old Man Dyer. so yeah, they drive him insane. Before they break everybody out, before they have the scene where they break everyone out of prison, they manage to get through a message to Old Man Dyer to cause a distraction. And Old Man Dyer organizes an impromptu musical number. And I think I planned on having this scene being reminiscent of The Sound of Music, where the Von Trapp family are escaping the Nazis by having people go off the stage and just filter off through the scene, like do something similar to that. So, bit of a character thing here. When Old Man Dyer sees the meddler for the first time, Old Man Dyer actually plots to kill him. He wants to kill the meddler. And the reason he wants to kill him is that he blames him for the death of Mr. Dyer. Now, of course, in the actual story, it was Dyer, Chadwick Jones, and Brain Surgeon who killed Mr. Dyer. But oof. Do I really want to get into that kind of spoiler yet? That's the problem. How do I reveal these sorts of things? But let's just say this. I'll just reveal it in the order I suppose it would have been revealed in the show, which is that the Old Man Dyer blames the meddler for this, and even though he knows that the others were involved, he in particular hates the meddler for it. Because he doesn't know the full story, obviously. He doesn't know who pulled the trigger or anything. He just knows the meddler was there. And in particular, he blames him for making this happen. So reasons for that will become clear later on in this stream. And everyone is after everyone is freed, is that is that Henry Hippie decide like everyone else, they decide, yeah, we're going to join Dyercentral. We are going to be strong, and we are going to fight back against Panther. Henry Hippie actually decides to go on his own way. He has been completely sober, obviously, because he has to be, and it's given him kind of a new perspective. He realizes that he has been wasting his life his whole time. He barely even knows what's happening. He was just going from fleeting moment to fleeting moment, and next thing he knows, he's in prison and suffering the worst pain of his life. And he realizes he barely knows anyone. He barely has anything to do. He barely has any kind of skills or reasoning. And he has decided he just wants to go off on his own way and discover his own path. And he just leaves. And this is partway through season 3. And yeah, because I had been trying to think of like ways to involve Henry Hippie in any kind of way, because he's kind of a third wheel of an inconsequential group in the first place, and that's what I decided would be a decent way to send him off, is that he's gonna become his own character now, and that'll be away from Dyercentral. So, um, so let's see. Anything else I can describe here? Okay. So I guess a lot of backstories will be explained in season 3, so I guess I should go for backstories now. As I said, I'll try and reveal this in the way that it would have been revealed in show. So, something else about the meddler is that basically what I was planning with him is that he'd be sort of the crash test dummy in the place. Like, we'd be taking him out just to make fun of him or just to have him do dangerous things for us. Just because it's funny, basically. But over time, he actually becomes a somewhat willing ally of Dyercentral. He starts doing the right thing. He starts helping out the cause. And the main reason is because he's so dumb that he still somehow thinks that he has like a bigger plan here where he's actually acting against Dyercentral. He maintains that this is still his greatest enemy, that Chadwick Jones is his greatest enemy. But like, when given any kind of opportunity, he doesn't do anything to act upon that. It's just he's so dumb he has a complete cognitive dissonance in his head when this is happening. It's not even Stockholm syndrome. He's just that dumb. Like, that's basically what was going to end up happening. But anyway, so time to explain the really cool part of season 3, which is the backstory of Brain Surgeon. What happened to Brain Surgeon in between season 1 and season 3? So we see him at the beginning of season 1. He's piloting the TM Quadruple Daddy Santis, and he's gone. The TM Quadruple Daddy Santis is gone. And when we next see him, he has white hair. He looks older. At least that's what I was trying to do. And shoveled and beat up. And so what exactly happened to him? And he has a TM Quadruple Daddy Santis. What happened to him in between these times? This is the story of what I've dubbed the alt future, the alt timeline, the alternate history. Now I get to describe what happened in this timeline, because it's pretty great. So, so this series of events, basically, it splits off from the time from the events during the Battle of New Zealand, basically. So the way this would have been shown, it would have been like shot for shot exactly what happened at the end of season 2, where Chadwick gets thrown to the ground by Don Macaroni, or not Don, by Marvin Jones. Marvin breaks his arm, puts him on the ground, except instead of being miraculously saved by the TM Quadruple Daddy Santis at the last second, Marvin manages to execute him. He fires that blast right into Chadwick Jones's face, and Chadwick dies. And that's where this timeline splits off from our own, or from the one we saw. So right after this happens, obviously in this timeline, Brain Surgeon didn't show up because Brain Surgeon wasn't in the future. So there you go. But yeah, in this timeline, Brain Surgeon didn't show up at that time. Um, and and Don, like, just when this happens, he just fucking breaks. He, like, everything he'd worked for is gone. This friendship he had developed with Chadwick Jones, because he sort of sees him as like a son. Everything in this is sort of broken, and it's all for naught. His entire company's entire battalion is dead. Everyone's dead. Like, um, and yeah, he just breaks and he just runs at Marvin with everything he has, just firing his gun, just like dead on into him. And of course, Marvin is just like Chadwick. He's a Saiyan, and he's just like flicking bullets off like it's nothing. Um, uh, like one or two manages to scratch his clothes, but that's about it. And it doesn't really matter. Like, Don knows that he can't really kill him. He's just trying to. It's just like some sort of last stand. But yeah, Marvin just calmly walks up to him, grabs him by the neck, and lifts him right up into the air. And from Marvin's perspective, Don is the whole reason that all this shit happened. He's the reason he had to bring his whole battalion out here, why he had to go for all this trouble. Because as far as he's concerned, basically what happened in his mind is that Chadwick Jones disappeared from his facility somehow. They're still not entirely sure how it happened, but he disappeared and he somehow showed up in New Zealand. So as far as Marvin's concerned, Don Macaroni somehow organized this or somehow was involved in this in some way. And yeah, he's just the reason that this all happened, and he's really, really fucking annoyed with him and really pissed that he lost all those guys in like the ambush in New Zealand and all that. So what he does is he uses the other hand. He's out holding him up by the neck with one hand. He reaches up and he tears off the front of Don's body. He rips him in half, front-wise. And really gruesome display. Although I planned on showing it in silhouette, partially because I could not possibly make that look good in any other sense. But yeah, very gruesomely tears Don Macaroni in half. So rip Don. So since there is no more deterrence, there's no Dyercentral, obviously. The Panther moves on in their plans, and they just start securing territory around the world. They start expanding, they start growing, and their plans are unleashed to the fullest extent. So Hippie, Maridale, and all that, they survive for a short time in the Panther prison, but obviously they have no reason to keep them alive for very long, so they're eventually executed later, just for fun. Old Man Dyer lives for a little longer for reasons that will become clear later. When Dyer does well, because in this timeline, much like in the regular one, he ends up escaping from the prison in sort of the similar sort of way. So he's still alive. He's not in the prison. So eventually, when Panther's big scheme of world conquest is about to happen, Marvin and the rest of them are inside of a giant hall. Marvin and the rest of the armies are in a big hall to celebrate. When we suddenly get a shocker. So, stuff fights. This is sort of important. I mentioned them a couple times. Stuff fights are essentially stuffed animals with mind control capabilities. So here's a little twist for season 1. So obviously, those of you paying attention, Coatmon is doing something to hypnotize Chadwick Jones. That should be obvious. But we mentioned the control chip and stuff too. That is a diversion. I'm just gonna say that right here and now. That is a diversion. what actually is happening is that the stuff fights are basically the idea is that they look like stuffed animals and they act kind of like stuffed animals, though they just sit around. And they've been distributed all around the world because they're cute, cuddly toys, and you keep them around. They emit low levels of mind control to people, though, and it basically brings people into order. It brings people into doing what Panther wants them to do. Um, and that's why when during the invasion of New Zealand, he mentions that the population will be pacified because of the stuff fights, but don't go shooting any of them. That's because it's low level mind control. It's not high level. It means that they'd be likely to not notice somebody walking through. The only thing he didn't anticipate is the fact that New Zealand is actually 10 years behind technology wise, and they don't have them, which he didn't expect because like it seemed ridiculous. They've been in circulation for a long, long time. But yeah, no stuff fights. Um, but yeah, so Kotemon himself is a stuff fight. He's a special kind of stuff fight, but he is a stuff fight. And what the control chip was, what actually was an amplifier. Um, and because basically, Saiyans already are kind of resistant to mind control. And not only that, they didn't want low level, they wanted pretty high level on him. So they installed that amplifier in his head, and Kotemon was the one that was actually implementing that sort of the stuff to him. And that's why Don Macaroni couldn't notice Kotemon. He didn't acknowledge him. He didn't do anything with him. It's because Kotemon was diverting his attention and all that sort of stuff. And he was also doing other things with Chadwick Jones, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But nonetheless, stuff fights, mind controlling creatures. So yeah, they've taken territory now because Stuff Fight Network is coming online. So all the people are under control. So they're in the beer hall for a party. When suddenly, they are all betrayed in a scene very similar to the Kingsman. The Stuff Fight Network comes on, and all the Stuff Fights in the hall, because there's a ton of them, they basically mind control everyone in there, because once the network comes online, and the network is each and every one of them is interconnected through their brains, and it amplifies their effects to an extraordinary degree. So it's not low level mind control anymore. It's really high level. Not high enough to where a Saiyan couldn't withstand it, but couldn't like totally withstand it. But nonetheless, so the so yeah, they betray them. Stuff I know comes online, and they basically ordered everyone in the hall to kill each other. And so that's what happens. And Marvin, of course, he's a Saiyan himself, and he just bashes through everybody. And he eventually succeeds, and he's a little worse for wear, but he succeeds. He gets out of there, and he falls right into a group of dozens of them. And here's the thing, like inside that hall, like he was still like killing people and stuff. And though it would take a lot more stuff fights to do that to him than it would to a human, enough of them will do it to a Saiyan. Like if you have enough stuff fights in one area amplifying all their stuff and taking the stuff fight network to them, it can work. So what he does is he stumbles outside. They of course anticipated this, and there's a whole dozens of them around them, and they hypnotize him into ripping his own head off of his shoulders. And that is how Marvin Jones dies in this timeline. Rip Marvin. So, there you go. Even if Panther succeeded, Marvin doesn't exactly live that long. So at least there's that. Let's see what happens afterwards. So we flash forward to 20 years later in this timeline. And the world looks kind of like a Mad Max apocalypse, basically, just total desert everywhere. Most of humanity died off after the stuff fights like launched the nukes. They launched attacks everywhere along the world, and the idea was just to thin out the population of the planet to a certain degree. and the rest, everyone else, has been forced into slavery to build giant machines to increase environmental pollution. So literally, the design purpose of them is to just burn up as much crap as they possibly can to destroy the atmosphere and um wipe out all life on Earth. Like, it's sort of like a Captain Planet villain to the max. What is what's going on here? Um, so that's what's happening to the world 20 years after the Suffite stuff happened. Um, so the only Dyercentral survivor is Dyer, who escaped many years ago, obviously. And his extraordinary luck, because that's his thing that's happening with Dyer, has made him a freedom fighter in the rebellion. Um, I also note that Kaweki probably also exists here, and if he does, he'll be mentioned as another freedom fighter on another continent who works with him from time to time. Because I think I asked Alex, like, what would you be doing in the future? And I gave him like a generic idea, and that's what he decided he would be doing. So I'm like, okay, there you go. So yeah, they're not fighting or anything. They're just kind of acting as freedom fighters, like trying to destroy these facilities or free people or something. But the problem is, there's no really freeing anyone if they're under the control of the stuff fights. It's pretty much just kill them or whatnot. At least at the time. Um, that was actually resistant because the bullet in his head is actually disrupting things. So, and is disrupting things, and also they've discovered just through pure happenstance that if you rush at them like a barbaric madman, just screaming at the top of your head and filled with as much rage as possible, it can actually overwhelm stuffites in pretty small numbers, and they won't be able to control you. So you can, if you see, so basically, the best chance of defense against one of these things, at least in this point in time, is if you see one, just fill yourself with the most rage filled thing you can do, the most testosterone, like adamantium rage um you can, and just rush for them like a barbarian madman and tear them apart. That's the best chance you have, because if you hesitate, like, it'll enslave you. So this is stuff I think about. It's kind of fun. But anyway, so yeah, this is the future that the brain surgeon arrives in. So he was playing around in the past a bit. He was just, like, exploring with the Tim Gridge of the United States. Basically, after he landed, the ship and stuff, Chadwick and, like, everyone else was just knocked out, and the ship was kind of worse for wear, because it kind of crash landed. So he drug everyone out onto the field. Brain surgeon did. And as he was waiting for them to wake up, he suddenly realized that he kind of has a time machine, and him being a scientist, he wants to play around with it and see what it's like. So, and of course, it's a time machine, he can just take it back to the moment he left them, and he doesn't really have to worry about just leaving them in the field. He can appear like a split second after he leaves. That's how he reasons it. So, he travels around for a bit, but eventually he wants to see what the future is like. So he travels to this point 20 years in the future. And this is the future he comes out in. So yeah, he wanders around and he's just shocked to find the world the way it is. When he eventually gets back to TM Quadruple Adisantis, he finds that it's been swept up by a garbage patrol, because there's garbage everywhere. And it's going to be burned for its emissions. So it's being drug off to a place to be burned for its emissions, and it just totally gets away from him, and he's stranded. He is stranded in the future, in this horrible, horrible future. So eventually, as he wanders around, he's eventually enslaved by Stuffites and put to work as an engineer. Um, would As a technical engineer, so he's organizing certain things that can't be handled by the network alone, which gives him some access to stuff, but not any clearance or anything like that. So he starts gaining knowledge of what happened to this universe and what's going on, and that's sort of how he reports back to Chadwick and how they prepare for stuff, and also why he's kind of fearful of all this stuff and why he's kind of cowardly. Um, But yeah, 2 years later, he's set free by Dyer. I should say, yeah, if you control like the stuff fights in the area and stuff, and you like somehow really enrage the people, you can sometimes free them. But other times, no wait, actually, I'm getting things mixed up. The problem is, after brain surgeon is uh, um, after brain surgeon is introduced, he starts coming up with ways to free people more easily, and the source starts an arms race, and that's why I got confused. But at this point in time, it's actually not that difficult to free someone. It's just that the freedom fighters in Dyer's force are so limited in number, because obviously if you can't manage to summon that amount of anger very easily, you're not going to last very long. Yes, it's pretty small, but eventually they manage to free Brain Surgeon. Like they break into his place and they free him, and Dyer obviously recognizes him, and he's because he looks exactly like he was 20 years ago, so he recognizes him pretty easily. Um, and he frees him. And so obviously he joins them and they work together. So this sort of starts an arms race kind of deal, where Brain Surgeon was coming up with more and more technical ways. He comes up with a drug that is able to make you more resistant to them. It's able to make you more enraged easier and all that. And he found ways of spraying it onto people that are enslaved, and freeing them from stuff fights in greater numbers. And stuff fights compensate by doing other tactics, which is instead of trying to stop the people themselves, they'll instead have conscript some of their human slaves as guards to rush at people, which of course causes a conflict of conscience there, because you'd have to either kill them or do something else. The people that are attacking you. And eventually, like when they, because obviously you can still sometimes free those people, they eventually start producing humans that have had their uh, uh what would you call it? They've basically been lobotomized and can't feel anger, and use those against them. And those people have to be killed basically, because they just follow orders and they cannot possibly like be saved and stuff. And Brain Surgeon comes up with something to counter that, and this sort of goes on for about 30 years. And 30 years on, it's become pretty hopeless. Like it's just a big back and forth, and they always just kind of resort to square one, and they never make any true progress with anything. Um, so he's gone very pessimistic. He's gone weary of war, and he's seeing all these people die over and over and over. And Dyer himself, who's like his master, his closest companion, he gets more and more disfigured as time goes on, because obviously shit's real. But one day, their team hits one of the incineration machines. And they're pretty small at this point, but they get a pretty good scoop on that this incineration machine is going to be pretty low guarded. But when they're going to destroy it, Surgeon finds out that it's actually been working at half efficiency for about 30 years, and the stuff fights were planning on like decommissioning it. And obviously, he realizes that this means it's a trap. They were going to destroy this thing anyway, but yeah, he realizes it too late, and all the rebels are massacred. Like everyone's massacred in a pretty brutal battle, sort of like a Terminator sort of thing. So Dyer and Surgeon and all the rest of them retreat further into the incinerator, and they discover what's been causing it to be so inefficient. Inside one of the grinders is the TM quadruple Dyercentral, because for those of you who know TARDISes in Doctor Who, they're pretty fucking strong. And its shields are still working, and they're still overpowering the grinder, and they're preventing shit from getting through. And of course, the only reason they were able to go down here in the first place is because they turned off the heat stuff. That's why the stuff fights never went down there to fix it, or sent anyone down there to fix it, because it would have been a death sentence. But they hit its power source and they shut it off and all that sort of thing. Anyway, so it's been overpowering the grinder this whole time. So it's basically down to Dyer and Surgeon at this point. and they attempt to flee inside the machine, and Surgeon gets inside, but Dyer is taken down at the entrance. And at Dyer's solemn request, Surgeon leaves for the past as Dyer fights them off in a last stand. So it's going to be a very emotional moment as that happened. So since he, so the Surgeon, even though he knows he's got to get away, he has no idea where to go or how even to accurately pilot the machine. So he just sends it flying wildly into the past, where it locks on and transmits to an enormous energy spike in the past, which was Chadwick Jones's Super Saiyan transformation. And that's why that happened the way it did. That's why Surgeon showed up at that exact time. It's because Chadwick Jones released an enormous amount of energy when he transformed into a Super Saiyan, and the Team Quadruple T Dyercentral locked onto that and honed in on it, and that's why he ended up there. So there you go. That is the alt future, the alt storyline. And I noted that the soundtrack during this is Western music, so that'll be the theme music for that. Just to give you an idea of how I'm thinking of this sort of thing. Let's see. Anything else? Okay. So I think that's all that's necessary for this season in particular. So something else that happens is that Chuck Jones is obviously Super Saiyan powers, but for those of you who are a fan of Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball franchise, Dragon Ball Super, whatever, you know that Super Saiyan is not the highest power form you can get. So over time, Chadwick eventually upgrades to Super Saiyan 3, and he does this pretty quickly because of some pointers from Surgeon and all this other stuff. But he finds out that I wrote this before Battle of Gods, so I didn't include any of this continuity. I'm including instead GT continuity. But he discovers that it's impossible to advance any further than Super Saiyan 3 without a tail. Because shit. I keep running into like tangents because I have to explain stuff. Oh. How much of this do I want to reveal? I'm gonna have to reveal it at some point, I guess. Is anyone watching? Is anyone watching? I'm so alone. You could give me pointers on how to explain this, but I'm so alone. Okay. All right. Okay. 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 I guess I did plan on having a whole bunch of backstory in this season, so and obviously in the year I'd find a good way to finish to hint at it without spoiling the whole thing. So let's get to the big spoiler then. The origin of Chadwick Jones, the origin of Marvin Jones, the origin of Mr. Dyer, the origin of fucking everything, basically. Find of the notes. Origin of Chadwick Jones. So, this all starts back in 1991. And in fact, I want to have like a little scene with Smells Like Teen Spirit, where we actually see this a series of events going on. But suffice it to say, and I'll go into even more details on this backstory much later, but it's not important to know now. But the person who runs Panther in 1991 is a fellow named Gerard Phillips, who is basically crazy. He has just taken over the company. Company in quotes. It's obvious. It's obviously like it's been dealing in crime business for a long time. Um, he's taken over, and basically instead of dealing with like normal crime stuff, he's instead wanting to build things to conquer the world. That's his. That's his actions. He wants to conquer the world, wants to take over the planet, and all this sort of shit. So one of those projects is something called Project Supercat, which you might have remembered Don mentioning at a certain point. Utilizing a laboratory in Southern California, Supercat was a secret project designed to create a clone army of Saiyan soldiers, fully loyal to the core, based on the DNA of a Saiyan called Eggplant. So his name was Eggplant, and they had his DNA, and they were planning on making a clone army of him. This, and bear in mind, this is a pretty dumb thing just from a story idea. This is dumb even in perspective of the show. Like, everyone around him kind of hates this idea. It's absurdly expensive, and like the company's losing money left and right to pursue this world, take over the world, Dr. Evil bullshit. But they had the money. They had the money to do it. So it was slowly moving forward. So though the cloning facility was built for Panther, it was also a business to try and offset some of the costs, and was open to other customers. So enter Old Man Dyer, or as he was known then, Mr. Dyer. Mr. Dyer was not a rich man. I'm reading from my notes now. Mr. Dyer was not a rich man, or a wise man, or even a very nice-looking man, but he sure got a lot of poontang. I actually wrote that in the notes. Mr. Dyer's sexual activity knew no bounds. He slept with everything that moved, and even some things that couldn't. However, after a while, he realized that none of this was making him truly happy. He had always wanted children in his life. Sure, there was the multitude of illegitimate offspring he had fathered: Dyer, Hippie, Merridale, Sheriff Lloyd, etc. Brain surgeon. But none of them brought him happiness. They were all too weird, especially Merridale. Eventually, his grief grew so massive that he knew he had to make a sacrifice. He took all the money that would have gone into his alimony payments and used it to buy himself a clone. A perfect clone. This caused him to have all his now teenage children brought into his possession by their fed-up mothers, but he didn't care. It took only a few months for the clone to be developed. It took only a few months for his clone to be developed. He named this clone Mr. Dyer in honor of himself. Mr. Dyer was just like his father in every way: greedy, maniacal, severely brain dead, but without the hindrance of parents that loved him. Jesus Christ, this is dark. As a clone, he fully matured in just 2 years and began being a complete douchebag to everyone from that point onward. And in fact, I've been having a very touching scene where Mr. Dyer is looking over his newly created cloned son, and I planned on him dressed like in hoodie and everything else, and have that scowl on his face, and is it? And they're like, perfect clone, eh? That's what I'll call you, PC Dyer. Oh, well, actually, that's a bit long. Well, you know what? I suppose you'll be Mr. Dyer from now on. I'm just your old man. So, plan on having that touching line in there. And yeah, that is how Old Man Dyer would have sounded like back in the 90s. He doesn't quite have this voice. It's a little more subdued, a little stretched out, but not crazy. He's middle-aged Dyer. Um, so yeah. So now he's called Old Man Dyer, and his son is just Mr. Dyer. Uh, so dumb. Um, so So Mr. Dyer, who is now known as Old Man Dyer, was so happy with the results that he went back to the cloning lab to get some more. He was thinking of all this sort of designer stuff, all these different things he could be doing with more clones. And when he arrived, he find the place strangely empty. Everyone was out having a meeting, I suppose. And he walked into the labs carrying a gallon of his semen into the laboratory, searching for a clerk to help him grow more babies. And eventually, as he was wandering down the halls, he stumbled upon a very special room. This room held a massive tank at ground level containing two incredibly small yet developing embryos. Um, so you know, he's looking at them, and they look kind of strange. And he's like, "Well, what is this?" Um, And suddenly, a lab assistant burst into the room because security had obviously gone off. So the lab assistant burst into the room, startling Old Man Dyer, and causing him to drop his cum jar into the clone goo. So it just starts mixing with everything in there. Some scientists hurry in to prevent the damage, but it was too late. The semen had merged with a young Marvin and Chadwick Jones. Dyer was locked up in a holding cell facility for what he did. Not too long after, the new CEO, because the old one had been, let's just say, disposed of because of all the terrible thing he did, came in. This one is just known as the executive. And he had basically been looking for any excuses he can to shut down these frivolous world domination attempts, except for one, because he saw some potential in it. But and that was the Stuff Fight Network, obviously. But yes, he had been looking for any kind of excuse to shut down this place, and this was one where he'd be less likely to shut it down because it is partially self-funded, but nonetheless still mostly relied on their funding. But yeah, he used the travesty to enter the facility personally to shut down the project. Well, not quite personally, but we'll get into this at that point. But yeah, he shows up. He's a very deep voiced man. And in fact, when Chadwick is going over, when Chadwick is getting some of those memories returning to him in the look back, you'll hear some voices and stuff. The very deep voiced man is the executive. Anyway. So, let's see. So he was about to order the facility to be burned to the ground when something caught his eye. Marvin Jones had his eyes open and appeared to wink at him. And there's character reasons why they would do this, but nonetheless, at the time, it seems to be just sort of an affection thing. But he decided to order things to continue development, so finish doing that. And once he is capable of leaving the tank, Marvin would be delivered to the executive to be his personal assistant. And Chadwick, he ordered him to have his life spared, and to convert the lab into a makeshift compound, and use the whole Chadwick under lock and key and save him basically as spare parts. He's being saved as an organ hosting farm because he's genetically identical to Marvin. So both of them are born successfully, and they have the genetic structure of both humans and Saiyans. So I was actually lying to you a little earlier when I said that they were both Saiyans. They're actually human Saiyan hybrids. And the thing that they had engineered onto them, they had mostly just left them intact, but they had actually engineered away their tails. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want to risk them turning into great apes, because this could be, because they're obviously pretty difficult to control, and a Super Saiyan 3 is pretty much all you'd really need to be able to beat up whoever the hell you want. Anyway, so they decided not to risk it. Um, uh, so let's see. So yeah, they contain traits from both human and Saiyan. They take after both of their fathers. So they're both born of two fathers and no mothers. So that's that's enough. So, yeah, Marvin, he refers to Old Man Dyer as Pops, and he refers to his adopted father, the executive, as Father, and he doesn't actually have a name for Lance because he's never met him and he doesn't really consider him. But anyway, so yeah, Marvin was sent to Badrock after they were born. Chadwick was locked up. OMD was released from custody and given permission to visit Chadwick on a regular basis if he so wished. When he went home, OMD found that Mr. Dyer had already found a way to claim he was dead and obtained full ownership of his house and finances. By this, the Stuffites were in the prototype stage, and as an extra caution, a decision was made to give one of these to Chadwick, codenamed Coatmon. It was found that those Stuffites have influences over humans, Saiyans are almost completely immune, so in order to make it more permanent, an amplifier was surgically implanted in Chadwick's brain. It was explicitly designed to regulate his emotions and memories. Using Coatmon as control, Chadwick would be made apathetic and weak. All high emotions such as anger and fear would be dulled in order to keep him under control. All memories deemed problematic would be suppressed. Um, uh, why not? I may as well go into this part too. So yeah, this is just everything that happened pre Chadwick Jones Presents with Chadwick. So in between him being put into the room and him obviously meeting Meddler and stuff, here's what's going on with that. So Coatmon. So and just bear in mind, throughout season 3, like when you hear about Coatmon, you're still assuming he's kind of a villain because obviously he is a Stuffite, and he's basically a mindless machine, or at least that's what they think. In truth, Stuffites actually have an intelligence to them. They're actually intelligent, but they're made to appear as though they're not. They're meant to appear as though they're just mindless machines that do what you say, and there's a reason for that too. Anyway, yeah, come on to perform, which is keep Chadwick contained, which is priority level 1, and protect Chadwick, which is priority level 2. So if for whatever reason Chadwick was about to escape and he couldn't really foreseeably stop him, Coatmon would be forced to kill him, which he can also do by just overloading the amplifier, setting it off in his brain, and making him die. Which is why Marvin was choosing to instead like have him blow it up with like motion and stuff. But Don was trying to do, because any other way and it might just kill him, and it almost killed him anyway. Okay. So anyway, after a while, a strange relationship sort of developed between the two. OMD and the others never visited very often, so for the most part, Chadwick was alone with his silent guardian. One night, Chadwick surprised him by lifting him in the air and playing with him. Since Chadwick was feeling a surge of joy, it was Coatmon's duty to suppress it, but for some reason, it didn't. Eventually, Chadwick fell asleep with a big grin on his face. Coatmon's processed this for a while, and because obviously he's not supposed to let Chadwick know that he can move and think. This would undermine his controls, but he'd been playing with him. So eventually, with what seems like reluctance, I actually want to keep it somewhat ambiguous to both you and myself whether or not Coatmon is actually sentient or if he's just really well programmed. or he just has like an AI that makes it difficult to tell. But yeah, eventually he erased Chadwick's memory of what happened that night. Similar events happened over Chadwick's development, and each time it became harder and harder for Koman to do it to him. One time, Chadwick actually figured out how to fly, and Koman immediately made him lose control and slam into the ground, hoping that he would never have to do something like that again. One day, after Chadwick had filmed himself experimenting with movie reviews, a stranger in a bad mask showed up. So obviously, we've reached the timeline here. Koman had no direct orders for these situations. The compound's supposed to be like locked down and sealed and stuff, so they never really considered that. So he defaulted just keeping Chadwick calm and not prone to violence, which is why Chadwick at no point even got out of his chair to stop the meddler. He did throw Chadwick at him, but even he was surprised when Chadwick actually threw him at the man. Um, at, so yeah, he was surprised when Chadwick did that. It was almost as if his memories kind of knew that like Koopman can move, even though he erased them. Um, so so yeah, he removed the mask from Meddler, obviously, um, but erased that particular part of it from his mind. So that's why Chadwick barely remembers the fact that Koopman can move and doesn't really acknowledge him. And that's why most people don't acknowledge him. It's because he's purposely erasing those parts of his memory. Um, the man was revealed to be none other than the meddler. He insisted on punishing, quote unquote, Chadwick by forcing him to watch terrible movies in the hopes that it would throw him into a suicidal depression. The strange part is it began to work. Though Coatman tried his best to keep Chadwick stable, he spiraled into depression until eventually something unexpected happened. When Chadwick survived the bad movie he witnessed, his emotions rapidly survived beneath the Mississippi. His emotions rapidly switched the other direction. Instead of being mopey, he was energized and pissed off. Koopman couldn't react quick enough to stabilize him. The signals he was giving to help lessen his depressive state were suddenly amplifying his manic state, and it's enough to where Chadwick fired a Kamehameha blast, and the force of which overloaded the amplifier, creating a small fracture in it. Um, which is partially what was able to be tracked later. Well, no, actually, that was something else. Which is the whole reason that Don set up his plan and stuff later. But I'll explain that. As Medler returned to finish him off, he was pursued by Chadwick into his own ship. Time seemed to slow down for Koopman. His two main objectives were flashing before his eyes. He knew that it was too late to contain Chadwick. He was going to have to leave unless he did something. He was going to leave unless he did something drastic. Protocol calls for him to execute Chadwick. He processes this for what seems like an eternity before the first priority is suddenly deleted. So priority one, to keep him contained, is deleted, and priority two is the only one that remains. So Koopman follows him into the Team Quadruple Daddy Santis, protects him from the meddler, and joins in with the events of season 2. So Chadwick forgets any sense of mobility, and the only other witness to it, brain surgeon, was far away at the time. So, oh, and apparently I planned on turning this into mostly a montage and playing Baby Mine from the first Dumbo over it. It's very sweet. Oh, that would have been a tearjerker. So during season 2, he influences everyone in the proper procedures to free Chadwick, deciding that as his guardian, he wanted nothing more than for him to be free. So Don had the general idea going on, but it was Koopman who was like kind of directing him as to the way to do it, which is keep getting his emotions up, keep getting him up and down, fracturing the amplifier more and more until eventually he'll be free from it. And then, like, no matter, even if Koopman wanted to, he wouldn't be able to control him from there. So that would be the only way. Like, if Koopman just, like, tried to shut down, like, the amplifier would just kill him. Like, and in fact, during that one sequence in, oh god, it was one of the Dragon Ball lookbacks where Chadwick is watching Bio Broly. Bio Broly has a lot to do with what's going on. It had to have been 7. Oh, no, it was 8. It was 8 while I was watching the movies. Bio Broly came. Oh no 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 no! Never mind. It was episode 6 because we were talking about the lead in the Bio Broly, and that brought up the memories. Remember when everything just starts staticking out and he electricity hit him and he just like freaked the fuck out. And Don Macaroni mentioned that like it let up at the last moment and that's the only reason he's alive. That was Koopman protecting him. Basically, a large amount of the amplifier gave through at once. A bunch of memories were flooding back and he was having a seizure. And Koopman saved his life after when that was happening. Like if he had just left and the thing just broke down on its own, Chadwick would have died. And yeah, Bio Broly in particular was a difficult one to break because obviously Bio Broly has to do with clones, cloning Saiyans, all that sort of stuff. So that brings back a lot of memories and it's a lot of similarities to Panther and stuff. So that's why we got a lot of memories when he was doing that. Um, let's see. And yeah, so Chadwick, obviously all the memories came back, and he realized that Koopman had been manipulating him. He had no idea what Koopman's process or anything he was doing was for, so he just interpreted it as he was manipulating the whole situation, so he reacted with violence and hurled Koopman towards some Panther troops. Later on, Koopman was taken into custody by Panther, where the scientists determined that his unusual behavior was due to a software glitch common in the prototype models, which is actually their artificial intelligence showing through. But and this is also because very few people actually knew that the Stuffites were given like a certain level of sentience. Like even Marvin had no idea. Even Marvin didn't actually know this. They thought they were just mindless machines. So using his minor influence over the unwitting guards, Koopman gathers intel and suppresses any new information about Chadwick's new location. So that's why Panther hasn't discovered them yet. But eventually, suspicion starts to rise again, and he escapes. And I planned on him rejoining with Chadwick Jones a little later. So yeah, lots of clones, and Old Man Dyer is the key to all of this. If we get Old Man Dyer working. So anyway, back to season 3. I was talking about season 3 20 hours ago. Jesus fucking Christ. Um. Okay. Season 3. So yeah. So obviously, here's the main thing. Chadwick advances this Super Saiyan 3, but yeah, he doesn't have a tail, and that limits his power. So Surgeon came up with a bit of a remedy for this. He's using raw materials from a strange pocket watch he found in the TM Quadruple T Dyercentral, which for fans of Doctor Who, this is from that episode where the Doctor has to pretend that he's human, and he uses like a fob watch type thing to store his Saiyan data, or not Saiyan, Time Lord data on it, and yeah, basically it's like the chameleon. No, what's it called? Whatever the hell you call it. It's some sort of device on his ship that lets him transform into a different species. That's what he found, and he uses this to create a device that purifies the body and removes imperfections, which is basically makes it an anti-gene therapy machine. So it'll reverse the genetic engineering. There are caveats to this. The main fact being that Chadwick is not a pure being. He's not like a normal bred human or normal bred Saiyan or even a normal bred human Saiyan hybrid that just happens to have a bit of genetic engineering done into him. Like he was created entirely in a lab. So this could end up killing him or could end up severely altering his personality or something like that. But nonetheless, he gets this attached to his arm. So it's not as elegant as the pocket watch. It's basically bolted into the bone on his arm, this thing. And so, yeah, the surgeon turns it on. Chadwick goes into a whole bunch of pain. And this leads into a pretty cool sequence where the machine attempts to properly configure his DNA. And it's sort of a very out of body experience thing where like this is all metaphysical. Like in real world, he's just like convulsing on a doctor's bench, basically. But like we see in like a metaphysical demonstration of what's going on, Chadwick splits into beings, two entities. Human Chadwick, that is very similar in personality to Old Man Dyer, and a Saiyan Chadwick that is very similar in personality to Future Trunks, basically. Um, and they disagree on everything. They argue it out until they come to a mutual understanding of something that links the two of them and puts them into the same state of mind. And at which point they merge back together as a brand new, invigorated Chadwick Jones, but with one small difference: the tail. Okay, so all that being said, God damn it, I've been going on for an hour and a half, and I'm not at the end of season 3 yet. Although, to be fair, season 3 has an abundance of story. Season 4 and 5 have a very limited amount of it. So once I'm through this, it'll actually be pretty short. So yeah, over the season, they use their combined abilities to build up Dyercentral from scratch. After the PRU captures, I still call them PRU in this. No, interesting. After Dyercentral captures one of Panther's oil drilling sites, I think I changed that later to once they storm the prison and take care of them. They piss off Marvin and the company enough to the point where they mount a full offensive against Dyercentral HQ. So similar to the end of season 2, but like even more shit. And it's out in the open, and they don't have to worry, and they aren't kept down by the New Zealand Army or anything like that. So it's just full on mounted offensive against Dyercentral HQ. There's a terrific battle where Don Dyer, Brain Surgeon, and several other characters help to fight off the Panther troops. Dyer at one point has to fight off a 10-foot tall troop who uses wrestling moves on him. I planned on using force perspective and stuff. That was going to be pretty fun. Chadwick hangs back, confident in everyone's abilities and knowing that Marvin is waiting for an opportunity to strike. So basically, sort of a cat and mouse, or not cat and mouse, sort of a game of chicken, basically, where both their armies are fighting against each other. Chadwick knows that Chadwick and Marvin both know that they're on way different leagues from everyone else in this battle. And if whoever steps out onto the field first will be at a disadvantage because they'll be out in the open and the other one can attack. So they're playing a game of chicken there to see who will actually go first. And as the battle wears on, many people die. Chadwick looks worried, obviously, because he's worried that Panther will get an upper hand. But they have lots of allies, so they're holding their own for a while. But eventually, Marvin can't wait any longer. He screams out a challenge to Chadwick, halting the battle. And Chadwick walks out to meet him. So they open up in a pretty drastic fight. Chadwick is holding his own. And Chadwick eventually transforms into Super Saiyan 2, like to show him up. And Marvin transforms Super Saiyan 2 as well. And then Super Saiyan 3, then Super Saiyan 3. And yeah, obviously Marvin's kind of mocking him when he's doing this. Sort of like, oh yeah, I can see you can do that. Can you do this? I can see you can do that, huh? But yeah, Marvin is not sweating this at all. Like he's kind of impressed that he's at Super Saiyan 3, but he's not sweating this at all because he's been training, he's been doing this for decades. He's been in this Super Saiyan form for decades. He knows it inside and out. And he can eat, and even if he's at Super Saiyan 3 himself, he's gonna beat him, and he knows it. So that's how he does it. And he's bragging on him, he's ragging on him. And then Chadwick transforms into Super Saiyan 4 in this very dramatic sequence. And Marvin is in total disbelief about it. Everyone stops fighting around them. Everyone is just all eyes on Chadwick. All eyes on Chadwick. Marvin actually starts thinking it's a trick, so he starts punching him. He starts punching him over and over and over, punching him faster and faster. Chadwick's not even reacting. He's just so toughened up by this that it's just like nothing. It's like feathers. And Chadwick just brushes him off. And Marvin, essentially, this is the first time he's ever faced anyone that powerful, that like above his ability. It scares him so much that he runs away, and he abandons battle. He runs away and he leaves, and the Panther troops evacuate as well. Everyone leaves. It's a big battle victory. Immediately, once Marvin is over the horizon, Chadwick slips back to regular form and passes out, but it doesn't really matter. Everyone is happy. Everyone's good. We've got a great big victory, and this is the end of season 3. So basically, this ending would have made the ending of season 2 look like chump change, and that's the idea. But yeah, planned on having a lot of extras, a lot of crazy stuff going on, a lot of fighting choreography. So that could have been fun. But yeah, a lot of stuff I planned on having in this. Lot of shit, like that backstory and stuff. A lot of shit I had to put into this. No idea how I would dole it out. Um, and that's not even to mention some other stuff I planned, but I had already cut out because it's kind of pointless. Where I planned on having that scene in 1991 um, where Phillips, uh, what's his name? Where Gerard Phillips is gets the lead CEO thing hung up to him, which is actually a pretty fun scene. I planned on having a different scene where Phillips is actually introduced when he first joins the company, and this is set in like 1960s or 1970s or something like that. I planned on having a scene set in 1960 something with a much younger Don Macaroni, who does not sound like Don Macaroni. And basically this is where it's basically where he experiences the oh no wait shit, it would have been like mid 90s actually, mid 90s Don Macaroni, who still nonetheless doesn't sound like Don Macaroni. And mid 90s it would have been him experiencing Panford taking over that city. And basically this is how younger Don Macaroni would have sounded. Don Macaroni, investigator. I actually would have said it like hello, I'm Agent Macaroni of Central Intelligence. And the reason he sounds so different, I'm going to include in every scene he's in, no matter what he's doing, he's always going to be smoking. He's always going to have a cigarette, a cigar, a tree branch, something. He's going to be smoking something the entire time. And that's basically my subtle nod of, that's why. That's why he sounds like that. But yeah. Tons of crazy stuff. So yeah. Before I move on to season 4, I guess I should go over with like how my time travel mechanics works. Oh, actually, I've been going on for an hour and a half, and it's just been my face this whole time. So let's put something a little more fun on here. My sketches for season 3. So you'll know, of course, you all notice that like the characters that were in season 3. So me, so Chadwick Jones, Brain Surgeon, and Don Macaroni all had different outfits, different costumes, and stuff on. And I plan for everyone to eventually get that kind of makeover, except for the meddler, because I want him to stay the same. But everyone else, like an updated look, an updated motif, and obviously, and yeah, you saw some of that. And obviously, the rest of the other people were still in like prison uniforms, so that's just what they were wearing. But eventually, they'd get new costumes and stuff too. So, starting off here, this here is Chadwick Jones T-posing to assert his dominance. Let's see. Can I zoom in? Oh, Yeah. So, um, fair warning, I am I am not an artist. I am not an artist. I am terrible, terrible at doing artist stuff. So my drawings are not going to look great. But his costume here, as designed, is basically how it turned out in the show. So black pants, steel-toed boots, a waistband, sleeveless shirt, um, and finger gloves, a duster, an angel's bandana. Like the idea is that, of course, it's the same. It's meant to be the same beanie that he had before, but he cut off the top so his Super Saiyan hair can go through. Um, this utility belt here is going to be was going to be filled with several different devices, like personal protection devices, uh, um, like communication stuff, like a Batman utility belt. This duster here, as well as looking pretty cool, it's also also in universe. It's made out of a very specific kind of material that's basically foldable lead or or pliable lead, and it looks like fabric when somebody's wearing it, but it weighs well over 2 tons and is completely bulletproof. Um, it accomplishes two things. It kind of shields him from sensors, and it also acts as like a training garb. So in Dragon Ball Z, obviously, like Goku wears weighted training gear, and that makes him super powerful. He wears that weighted training gear, and then when he takes it off, that's when you know his power level is gonna rocket up by 20,000 times or something. Similar kind of thing with this. I'm wearing a um sleeveless vest underneath it, basically, and when I take the coat off, Chadwick's power level like raises right through the roof. So it's pretty cool. So moving on. Um, God, I'm so terrible. John Macaroni. Yeah, decorations, matching pants, mustache, general cap. I don't think I ended up getting the cap, but he was gonna have a little cap. Basically, he was gonna be going as General Don Macaroni. His full name is Donald. He's not literally a mafia don. Um, and yeah, his General Macaroni would be his name. He's the general of Dyercentral. And yeah, his things like that, and obviously a ridiculous amount of decorations that I put on there. Um, there's some Easter eggs and stuff in his patches, so keep an eye out in the Pixies review. I had some fun with it. Oh god, this is the worst one. Brain Surgeon. I don't know how the hell I messed him up so badly, but I should say, Brain Surgeon like invented a lot of crap for everyone. And the interesting thing about it, like Don Macaroni's shirt coat here, it looks like a regular coat, but it's actually been engineered by the surgeon to have the same kind of technology that the Inside Team Quadruple Santis does, which means like foldable space. It's bigger on the inside, basically. So inside of his coat is just a multitude of weapons of all shapes and sizes that he can pull out at any time. And that's what he uses when he's in battle and all that sort of stuff. Um, Surgeon, obviously, glasses, hair, white wig. As I think I did, I put an E at the end of wig. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? Um, uh, yeah, lab coat. I originally planned on him still having a towel. That's what that says there. But I got rid of that last second, and a blue shirt that I planned on being like a Star Trek homage there with like the tunic. And the stuff around his arms, those are called science gauntlets. You'll have noticed them in the show. Also, Surgeon turned out so reflective that in that episode that I planned that if I continued making those, I was just going to say that part of his arsenal here is that he can turn invisible if he needs to. So his lab coat also has some of that foldable space, though it can't contain as much as Don's. What his science gauntlets are, basically, they're like they're basically wearable tool cabinets. The idea is that they have all these different tools and stuff that he needs, little mechanical devices, little things like that, screwdrivers, electric screwdrivers, things like that. But they're all mounted on his arms, so he can do science anywhere, anytime. And yeah, I'm just gonna say he can turn invisible with those gauntlets. He can um, he has little lasers and stuff. He's mostly meant for his, as far as weapons and stuff, he's mostly a defense kind of guy. He's not really much of an offense kind of thing. That's the other thing. I kind of designed them for battle as well, if I ever want to do something like that. This is Meridale. So Meridale looks like he's um, they, I guess, are high on PCP by the looks of it. Got a flight cap, um, a mismatched shirt with various weapons inside of it, so it just looks like complete garbage nonsense. So yeah, um, they'd have like a freaking like chains and crazy shit inside of there, like complete madness. Um, a flower skirt and no shoes, baby, no shoes. The idea of Meridale is that they're just so fucking crazy and scary that like you don't even want to get near them. So, um, Hangry Hippie. Um, so earlier in the series, I didn't plan on him leaving, so I made him a battle outfit as well. So his idea was that he would be playing around with chemicals, and that was his thing. He'd throw chemicals at people, and that was his weapon. So he had the bandana, tie-dyed shirt, bandolier of chemicals, jean shorts, and sandals. Um, uh, this looks an awful lot like Alex, and moving on. This is Dyer. Oh god, his little smile. um, So yeah, this is what his outfit would have looked like later on. He wears a backwards baseball cap to disguise his scar that's on his head because he obviously has a scar, with wraps around both of his fists, and a bandana around the knee because when you're a badass in the '90s, that's what you do. Um, this is Old Man Dyer. Uh, Dusted hair, wrinkles. I actually decided to go have a bit more makeup and stick to the makeup and not be super lazy. Suspenders, hiked up pants, and a cane. So he's actually going to like continue using a cane during this. And those of you who know me from my old theater days, I love canes. So he was gonna have one. Here is Dyer as portrayed in the alt future. Two versions of him. So the version 20 years in the future, and the version I guess it would be 50 years in the future, or roundabouts. So he gets really fucked up, as you can see. So this is when Brain Surgeon first meets him 20 years in the future. He's 42 years old, I note there. His scar is he has like pretty long unkempt hair. His scar is exposed. Um, and it's like this badass like scar. Two machine guns locked on the back of him, bandolier right here. A hook hand, and yeah, these awesome pants, belts, all that sort of stuff. Um, when he's 73 in the far future, it's really fucked up. He's got another scar that's going over his right eye, so he's blind in one eye. A very, very long ponytail. Um, a prosthesis hook hand that's actually something the brain surgeon invented that allows him to like utilize it more like a hand. Um, only one gun that he uses with his left hand. He's no longer dual wielding because he's too old for that. But he's missing fingers on that hand. On his one remaining hand, he's missing fingers on it. And he's got a peg leg. It looks like I added that later. But yeah, he's even more fucked up. I'm not sure why I drew these two so skinny. There is no way in hell I'll ever look this skinny at any point, but I'm not a great artist. And this here is concept art for the title screen. So the opening that I mentioned. I was planning on a little opening. So at the as you'll know, during the opening sequence of season 2, I have that little thing where Chadwick walks on screen and creates like a little fireball and stuff. This is going to be a similar thing where the camera was moving around, and it ended on us doing some cool stuff. So brain surgeons posing like that. Um, Don is shooting off into the distance. Chadwick's doing like a yeah pose with his left hand. Oh, fun fact: Chadwick Jones is left-handed. If you pay close attention to Pixies, you will notice that he always gestures with his left hand. Um, and Marvin Jones is right-handed. And the reason I did that is so that when they collided fists in the end of season 2, that it would look good. But I decided to commit to it, and Chadwick Jones is left-handed, and I actually reshot some stuff in the Pixies review to make sure that he is left-handed. So, fun fact for all you lefties out there. And that's the meddler in the background there. So the meddler would be there all season, and kind of hard to make out, but that is the face of Marvin Jones peering angrily down from the clouds, basically. So yeah. And here is some schematics for the Science Gauntlet. I actually went down to a plastics company that I blurred out the name of there, and got some plastic from them and engineered this shit myself. And it is basically functional. There's magnets on the end here, and you lift up each flap, and there's like a tool compartment in there. And that they're totally bulky, totally ineffective for how in universe you use them, but they're fun. So that's just how they were designed, and yeah, and I believe that's it. Yep, back to Chadwick. So back to the notes. Let's see here. Okay, so I think that's all I should have to say for now. But then there's season 4. So moving on to season 4. So the theme song of this was supposed to be in 7th second measure, which is, if you listen to it, it basically sounds like death and despair. This is what I've deemed the depressing season. So yeah, it has a dark Western feel to it, to associate with the alt future. That's what I've noted. So I don't have many reviews in this. I only have like a couple. One of them is the Incredible Hulk cartoon, where I do a parody of the intro, and that has something to do with a development that happens in here. And I'll read out my notes here. I'm so sorry, but the Nut Shack. Review the Nut Shack. It has to happen. This is the depressing season. It will all be okay. The Nut Shack is a cartoon that is bad. Yeah. The surgeon, obviously, he has methods to resist stuff I influence and all that. But those things he's been giving people are becoming a lot less potent as Panther begins setting the network to maximum as the season goes on. So like they're pumping up those numbers after their loss. Like they're really going at it hard. Every now and then, like meathead like creatures begin trying to kill Chadwick. So like things just keep coming at him all the time. These giant creatures and stuff. Spirits are low when the group is hit with the most devastating news. Due to the injuries inflicted upon him by Chadwick in season 2, so when Chadwick beats him up when he was pretending to be a narrator, Don falls ill and dies halfway through the season. Before he dies, Chadwick gets into a fight with him and exchanges some harsh words. He returns to Don immediately after learning of his condition, only to find that he is already dead. Old Man Dyer tells him that Don's last words were an apology to Chadwick. Right in the nutsack there, wasn't it? Jesus. Rip Don. Chadwick finally snaps when, during a crossover with Strange Hippie, Chadwick becomes a great ape, forcing Strange to destroy the device on his arm. Um, so he becomes like a golden great ape and just out of control, and Strange is forced to destroy the device on his arm, and it was a one of a kind. You can't make another. So he can't become Super Saiyan 4 anymore, basically. The stress of all of these situations causes Chadwick to go into a deep depression and cause destruction to the HQ, to the base, before leaving in search of guidance. Without a strong leader to look through, things look grim for Dyercentral and the world. So basically, Don's dead and Chadwick's missing, and it's just Brain Surgeon in charge of it. And if you'll recall, he was the one who suggested just laying low and hiding, so he is not the kind to be in charge of this organization. So that's the end of the season there. As I said, see, that's it. That's all of season 4. The Strange Hippie thing is funny. Back in the day, Alex was throwing around the idea of maybe starting his own sort of review show. Never happened. But I still held out hope, so I was saying there that his hand Strange Hippie would have been him, and he would be involved in my story. Obviously, never happened, and never going to happen. So, reason why there's an Incredible Hulk review. After the Super Saiyan 4 form is destroyed, obviously Chadwick needs to find another thing to happen because these huge bulky creatures keep coming after him. So he needs to find some way to repel all this stuff. So he creates his own form, which is a unique form that he titles Super Saiyan Beast. And basically it draws influence entirely from like dopamine and all this other shit in his brain. And it's comparable to Super Saiyan 4, the thing, and it basically makes you super duper buff like yeah, how I'd portray it, I'd basically be in a muscle suit. It just makes you super buff, and it makes you super ragey. And the more often you use it, because it relies on dopamine, you become addicted to it, and it also makes you more out of control every time you use it. So every time he's forced to use this, he wants to use it more. Like he feels the need to use it more, and it also becomes less like control. So it's becoming like the Incredible Hulk. So that's why we'll do an Incredible Hulk cartoon review thing. And this sort of ace when he destroys the HQ and stuff. The Super Saiyan Beast thing is just so hard to contain at some point that he just destroys the base, and that's why he leaves in search of guidance. Like he feels like he's totally failed everyone after that happens. All right, so season 5. Season 5. Okay, so I feel like I'm about to sneeze. We find that Chadwick has spent the past 6 months meditating in a small monastery with a man known as the Enlightened One. Chadwick is at conflict with himself. He feels guilt over the death of Don, weakened due to the loss of his tail and Super Saiyan 4, and conflicted over what side he should be fighting for. He doesn't know if he should be following Goku's path or Old Man Dyer's. So, should he be fighting for what's right, or should he be working for himself, or should he be like he doesn't know? He has no idea what's going on. Until his soul is at rest, he will not return. The Enlightened One bestows his knowledge upon him in the form of a Nimbus cloud. The cloud will only accept those with a pure heart, which the Enlightened One explains has nothing to do with morality, but the conflicts of the heart. And members of Dyercentral take turns reviewing movies, each in their own. Oh yeah, both conflicts of the heart. I should probably explain that. This is mostly an interpretation of what it means in Dragon Ball. I'm pretty sure they mean just pure of heart in a good way in there. But I'd like to point out that, like, in with the not what's it called, a spirit bomb that Goku uses. It was mentioned explicitly that you have to be pure of heart in order to repel it. Otherwise, you can't. Like, it just engulfs you. But Kid Buu manages to repel it, and he's certainly not good. He's not pure good of heart. So the way that's normally interpreted by fans is that he was pure evil, and that also works in its own way. Uh, so I've kind of extrapolated that to where, because good and evil are kind of fluid concepts in certain ways. So I was assuming that it has not much to do with that, with like so much as you do this and you are good, no matter what doing this entails or what something like that. Instead, it's more to do with conflict of content, conflicts of intent, and all that is what causes the impurities per se. At least that's how it's being interpreted in my universe. That's why he's been given the Nimbus Cloud, which would be, if he is able to fly it, that will prove that he has achieved like balance and that he's pure in his own way. Um, so sort of a fun thing that would be happening during this season, like Chadwick would still be reviewing movies, but he'd be reviewing different kinds of movies. But in his absence, the members of Dyercentral will take turns reviewing movies as well, each in their own style and quality. So there would be a Dyer episode of CJP. There would be an Old Man Dyer reviewing something. Brain Surgeon would review something. Meridale would review something. Um, so just as it seemed like Chadwick will never recover, Henry shows up at the monastery. Apparently, ever since he left in season 3, he has traveled around the world and seen many beautiful things, um, and experienced life and become his own person. And he was coming to this monastery. He didn't know Chadwick was there. He was just coming there to find one more thing and to keep going on and all that sort of stuff. His experiences inspired Chadwick. Eventually, Chadwick clears his mind and decides his path. It is at this point that Chadwick grows a new tail and rides the Nimbus Cloud over to Dyercentral HQ. So he finds himself completely, and his tail actually grows. Um, so, so he rides the Nimbus Cloud over to Dyercentral HQ. He finds that things have gotten far worse since he left. The area has been ravaged by Panther and the Meatheads, as well as losing their members to an almost complete control network set up for the stuff fight. So they've just been purging members. They're barely staying afoot. Obviously, Surgeon is a little distrustful of what's going on with Chadwick, but they reconcile and they come together, and they just decide that now it's basically now or never, because Panther pretty much believes that they're on their last knees and they're going to be starting up the network soon, so they're at their weakest. So that'll mean that this is it's you do it now or they're going to win. So Chadwick's idea is that the fastest way to destroy Panther and avoid the future is to make an attack on Panther HQ, like directly. Surgeon thinks he's crazy. It says the place is surrounded by security that even a Super Saiyan 4 would be frightened of. Not to mention a horde of stuff fights that would immediately incapacitate everyone else. But Chadwick fully restored his confidence, so he makes a speech that rallies the Dyercentral and convinces them to take a stand. They split off into two teams, one led by Surgeon with the intent of finding the stuff fight control network and dismantling it, one led by Chadwick with the intent of locating the Panther CEO and holding him accountable for his crime, so finding the executives. And it looks like they are about to succeed when they all start being bombarded by the stuff fight's advanced mind control. So it gets turned up to like several other notches. A whole bunch of other stuff is going on. This is just the basic outline, and I was going to flesh it out later. It looks like they're about to fail when Surgeon finally manages to insert the worm he designed, which disintegrates the network as well as makes the stuff fight intent obvious to everyone. So it doesn't kill all the stuff fights, it just means that they aren't interlinked anymore. And that basically disables the kind of control that they were having. Um, So it makes the lieutenant obvious to everyone in the world. So they're going to lose now. They basically lost that. Um, Chadwick gains his second win from this and manages to bust into the CEO's office, where he sees who the CEO really is. Um, it is a rock, specifically President Rock's brother. Dum dum dum. Um, and in fact, I hadn't written it down here, but I planned on having a thing where Marvin actually confronts the executive. He finds him in his room. Oh god, oh god. There's something else. So, um, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. Would have been a funnier reveal. So, Mr. Rancher was actually going to have a bigger part here. Um, Mr. Rancher, basically, Mr. Dyer's dead, obviously, and everyone else has left the old Dyercentral house, the old Dyercentral compound, the old house that Old Man Dyer lived at. So what is happening there? The old, what you would call the old school Dyercentral, or the OC Dyercentral, whatever you want to call it. What's happening with them? Basically, Mr. Rancher is the one who's in charge, and and obviously they're looking around for allies in season 3, so they contact Mr. Rancher as one of the allies, and you know they've basically with Dyercentral they set up their own like YouTube like thing. It's like a modest like YouTube channel where you know they just do like sketches and stuff, and Mr. Rancher is in charge of that. And you know he of course offers to help and stuff, but things keep getting in the way, and it doesn't quite work out. Um, uh, but eventually, but um, eventually we find out that Mr. Rancher um is working for the uh, uh for Panther. He is actually an operative there, and he was put in charge to try and trap them, and he almost does. Um, and I actually, and here's the real chucker: Mr. Rancher is the executive. Now, I know I just said that President Rock's brother is the executive, but hold on to me for a second. Pretend I didn't say that. Mr. Rancher is the executive. So when we actually see the flashback and stuff, he's dressed as Mr. Rancher. He looks exactly like Mr. Rancher. Mr. Rancher's appearance never changes. He's wearing the big cowboy hat. And he says, "Why, yes, I live and breathe." But he switches to the deep voice when he gets serious. So when we see the scene, like obviously in that flashback, he says, "You can have one, I will take the other." Like that's him being serious. But the rest of the time, he's saying, "Why, yes, I live and breathe. You have done broke into my facility." And he speaks like that all the time. And I actually planned on making that like really creepy too, the way he would sometimes say that. "Why, yes, I live and breathe. You kind are constantly getting in my way. It sure makes me mad that I'm gonna have to kill all them women and children." You know, he'll be saying stuff like that, like really creepy. And he is the executive. That's what we find out. So Chadwick actually confronts him in the hall outside of his office, and he fights him. And he, of course, it's Mr. Rancher who expects Mr. Rancher to be a good fighter, but he actually holds his own. He's actually holding his own against Chadwick. And the reason is because Mr. Rancher is an android who is being controlled from within the building. So when he bursts into the building, he finds that his true identity is that rock. His name is Bad Rock. So Marvin steps in to protect his master, and Chadwick tells him to leave and never return. Panther has failed, and a new dawn has come. Marvin and Bad Rock fly away, and we have a happy ending. Chadwick Jones Presents has begun, although it's not really. So the only movie I have listed for actually reviewing in this season, which shows you where my priorities are, is The Holy Man. Like literally, that's the only movie I put here, with Eddie Murphy, I think. Uh, so yeah, let's see. Uh, so we'll go with some other concepts for things that could have happened after season one, and then I'll go after season five. I mean, and then we'll go into other things, some other backstory stuff that I haven't gone over yet. So here's some future beyond season five story ideas. So at one point, Marvin will find out about the Enlightened One and will attempt to kill him for giving Chadwick the means to destroy Panther. The Enlightened One gets him to leave peacefully and never return, using only calm words, because he's enlightened and he knows how to do something like that. And he also plants an idea in his head: who am I, really? It's deep, man, real deep. Chadwick and Marvin stay in Father Eggplant returns. Just an idea. I have no idea what that character would be like. Introduce Mongo, one of the 12 Eternal Titans. So in the universe, there are 12 Titans of varying strength, defense, and behavior. Who and people are only a guess that there's 12 of them. They're pretty sure that there's 12 of them, though there's, by their nature, that's impossible to say that for sure. But these titans are linked around the one fact that they were the only thing that links them together, because obviously they're very different in how they interact, how they look, everything like that. The only thing that really links them together is the fact that they are around since the beginning of time and are at least passively immortal. So that means that if you if you like don't kill them, they'll live forever. So Majin Buu is one such being, or I should just say Buu, and that devil-like entity from Doctor Who is another. Something that's been around since the beginning of time, and will live forever. But Mongo is the only known Titan in the universe that is thought to be completely immortal, which means you cannot kill it. He spends his time sniffing out food to eat, and his favorite and he loves eating people, like live raw people. He's basically like a 10-foot story tall monster wearing like a loincloth, and that's about it. And he eats people. He's he's like a Attack on Titan kind of character. But he can also like fly around, and he like destroys galaxies and shit. Like he's really fucking powerful and completely unkillable. And he sniffs out food to eat, which namely Saiyans. And during a future storyline, he would find Saiyans. He would sniff out Chadwick and try to eat him. And the way he is, like, you can't really stop him from eating you either. You can't really hold him back. He's like a one punch man in that sort of way of like, if he really wants to do something, you can't really stop him. So yeah, he tries to find Chadwick, but he gets turned off of Chadwick when the meddler shows up. Because here's the thing: while he finds Saiyans to be some of the most delicious creatures in the universe, Time Lords are the most delicious of all. So in fact, the Time War in Doctor Who was actually an attempt to lure Mongo into the negative zone to get rid of him forever, and it didn't work. He managed to escape. So I plan on deflecting that to where, like, suddenly, oh my god, we got to save the meddler from being eaten by Mongo. And I've noted that he is 15 stories tall and very fat, and he talks like a Gungan. So, Misa like the Saiyans. Misa fik Saiyan no tesa good. That's Mongo. And yes, it would have been played by me in a loincloth. So, I'm. Count your blessings, everybody. Count your blessings. Okay. Dyercentral eventually encounters Bizarro Meddler. So Meddler's rocky-faced doppelganger and outcast from the Bizarro universe. He looks just like the Meddler, except he has rocky appearance and he's much stronger. So he's exactly like Bizarro people in the Superman stories. And of course, he's an inverse of everyone. So Bizarro Meddler is extremely intelligent, like very, very intelligent. So at first he acts like a villain, but he eventually realizes that Chadwick fights for the same ideals and joins his side. So we have a Meddler and a Bizarro Meddler on the same team, because Meddler's just that dumb. He eventually causes jealousy amongst Meddler and Brain Surgeon. Meddler because he feels his clearly inferior doppelganger is treated better, because he is. And Surgeon because Bizarro's extreme intelligence undermines his own. So as clever as Brain Surgeon is, Bizarro's even better. And Surgeon is especially distraught when he overhears Bizarro referring to him as an imbecilic aide. Or actually, he would speak like, my imbecilic aide. He speaks with an extremely deep voice. Woo. Eventually, this results in a heated argument between the two, before they make up in a scene resembling the clay molding scene in Ghost, but with scientific equipment. So, oh my love, and they end up having sex with each other, and from this point on, they are lovers. Jesus fucking Christ, what did I write? Oh my god. Oh my god. So yeah, they're lovers. And in fact, a hidden part of Brain Surgeon's character that I was planning on introducing is that he might be a Cenobite, and at the very least, he is into BDSM. So there you go. Emperor plagiarism. Yeah, I already mentioned all that stuff with Emperor plagiarism. So I'll go over a few more of the remaining backstories I have written here, and then we'll go over the way I planned on ending the series if I wanted to give it a proper ending far in the future. So this would have been if it went on beyond season 5, but eventually I wanted to cancel it and how I would. So anyway, let's go to the backstory. So backstory of the Rock Brothers. So the man who would eventually be known as President Rock and Bad Rock. So long ago in the mountains of the West, there lived a rock called Rock. He lived a simple, rock-like life on the mountain with his rock brothers and sisters, and he was very happy. That is, until one fateful day, well, one fateful half-century of erosion and microcracks, he falls down the hill, falls on a point, and breaks in half on impact. Rock was split into two pieces. One rolled towards an empty ravine, while the other went to a small village where some children happened by. Hey, Borschwinken, want to play with this rock? Da, it's the Middle Ages. We have literally nothing better to do. And so this descendant of Rock was called Rock, in honor of his father, or perhaps because he happens to be a rock, but that's not important. It is from the love of these kids that Rock learned to love humanity and all it had to offer. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hill, the other half stopped rolling just before he hit the ravine. He then sat there for many years before he was pooped on by a passing bird. It was at this point on that he gave himself the name Bad Rock and vowed to eliminate life in any form. God damn it. So, origin of Panther Corps. Okay. Okay, yeah, this is something I was planning. I should have got into a little earlier as well. The mechanics of time travel in my universe. So obviously, this universe is based on two main things, which is Doctor Who and Dragon Ball. And they have two different methodologies for time travel. So with Dragon Ball, the way that time travel works is that when you, like, obviously if you travel into the future, I guess like you travel into the future, no big deal. If you travel into the past, however, you create another universe. So whatever you do in that past, quote unquote, it won't affect your present, your future. Um, so, for instance, Trunks went back in time and killed the androids, and then he went back to his dimension where the androids are still perfectly fine and killed them. So, there's two dimensions that have been caused here, and Dragon Ball Super basically confirmed that they run parallel alongside each other and all that sort of stuff. So time traveling causes different dimensions to be created that are their own unique thing. And every time somebody time travels, this happens. So, in Doctor Who, it's a little more complex because obviously the show revolves around time travel and it's been on for like 50 years, so it changes a lot. But essentially, the future is malleable, but not that malleable, and there's certain things you can't change no matter what. That's basically Doctor Who, and it is all one timeline. There are parallel universes, but you don't affect them by changing the timeline in the past and creating new dimensions. That's just the natural part of the universe. This is sort of different from all of those, my version of it. So, in my version, when you go, if you imagine that the timeline is one straight line, you travel from one end of that line to the other, and doing so, no matter what you're doing, changes the direction of that line, just ever so slightly. Now, the interesting thing about this, it's sort of the opposite of the butterfly effect. So in the butterfly effect, if you went back in time and you stepped on a butterfly, it would cause drastic changes in the future. And that is not true. If you cause very minor changes, you will still cause the timeline to change just ever so slightly, but it comes back to itself. And the farther back you are and the lesser the impact you have, the less the timeline of the future will actually be affected. So, say for instance, if I were to go back and kill my own grandfather, um, when I return to the if when I flash forward to the future, there would not be a version of me that has existed. I will have come from a totally different timeline that now no longer exists because because my grandfather is dead, and that timeline doesn't exist. You can't visit it. It's gone. It's gone forever. Um, and my future would be different, but the future 10,000 years from now wouldn't have changed very much of all at all. And same thing, like imagine if you went back to ancient Egypt and killed a random pharaoh. And the way this time travel system works, the history of that world, the timeline could have changed quite a bit, like of several centuries down the line. But in modern day times, thousands of years later, it would be almost imperceptible. So there's sort of a destiny aspect to it as well. That these ripples kind of distant, fade in distance. Um, so that's basically how the time travel thing works. So when the meddler time traveled, so in the original timeline, the unmolested timeline, Chadwick basically spent his entire life inside of that room. He never got set free. Um, and eventually, stuff fights took over, and he was just killed to tie up loose ends. That's the original storyline. That's not even the alt future, that's a different future. And every time the meddler traveled back in time and changed shit, it got more and more um, distorted till eventually Chadwick ended up leaving, um, which was a pretty high distortion, which happened specifically because the meddler went back and changed the designs of its house, which is a pretty major design change. Um, and same thing, but even that didn't really affect the future, now did it? It only really got affected when the brain surgeon traveled back in time and saved Chadwick Jones's life. That had a pretty major impact on the future. Um, although, sort of to my point, was it like 4 billion years from now, the sun will still have destroyed the Earth, And that's certainly not going to have changed that, even though it had a pretty significant impact on the Earth's recent future. And all life on Earth isn't going to die off now or in like 100 years from now because of the change. Um, it doesn't mean all life on Earth won't die out at some point. So the bigger the impact you have with the time travel, the more the effect will change, but it irons out over time. That's basically it. So, um, with that, I'm going to get to the somewhat confusing and cyclical nature of the very, very end of Chadwick Jones and some more backstory as to the beginnings of Panther. So, um, so in this ending, Chadwick is sent back to the 1820s Deep South, while several Dyercentral characters, namely Surgeon, are trapped in ancient Egypt. Chadwick manages to create a few more reviews before the battery in his camera dies out. He stores them on a single flash drive, so he still has some of his equipment, but obviously it's 1820s. You're not going to be able to charge anything. You're not going to be able to do much, and he doesn't have a time machine. The time machine is back in ancient Egypt, and he's trapped. Um, so after all that runs out, he starts his own life, where we see highlights from his days in the past, culminating with his death in the 1880s. Um, During the 2040s, the flash drive eventually falls into the hands of Marvin, who is starting to show signs of age himself. We see him watching these final moments before he turns around and looks at the TM quadruple T Yadisantis, which looks to be several thousand years old. We then cut to black, leaving it ambiguous as to whether Marvin decides to save him or not. So here comes the cyclical part, the origin of Panther Corp. So, by 1830, the time traveler known as Chadwick Jones has settled down into his new life and even fathered a son who he named Marvin in honor of his brother. In 1852, he even founded his own fishing business, Jones and Son, which was a minorly profitable and operated out of southern Louisiana, but also served a different purpose. About 90% of the profits went into designing and constructing several underground transport lines, with the idea of smuggling escaped slaves into the freedom of the North, so northern states and Canada. Um, uh, Please don't get mad at me if you're offended at some of this stuff. I'm very dumb. Uh, over time, this turned out to be a profitable business on its own, since grateful families were more than happy to leave donations for the pair. After the Civil War, the tunnels were boarded up for many years until Chadwick's greedy teenage grandson, William Jones, reopened them in 1898 in order to begin smuggling merchandise with some of his cohorts. Um, on his deathbed, Chadwick learned about this. Um, on his deathbed, Chadwick learned about that this was happening, and that the tunnels had become a smuggling ring for everything from immigrants to illegal produce. It was here that the tunnels were known to the common folk as Panther Ways, due to a rumor that, while smuggling a herd of large cats for eventual release in the wild, one of them broke 3 of its constraints and still wanders the labyrinth-like tunnels to this day. The rumor became so widespread that the group was eventually known simply as Panthers, considered a petty gang by most law enforcement. When Marvin died of kidney failure in 1912, and Chadwick obviously died in about 1880s, Williams stepped up the operation, expanding the tunnels and shifting into riskier and more profitable territory, drug smuggling. This continued for several decades, getting larger and larger, until William was king of one of the largest smuggling rings in the world. Never managed to stay low on government watch lists, however, due to the infallible luck that was with them all the time from all that long ago. Um, Willie William was the reigning leader of Panther all the way to his death in 1991. So literally, he lives like almost over almost 100 years. So when did I say he was born? 1882. So I claim that he lives to 109, and he's leader of that entire time. William never had any children and had no care for what happened to anyone after he passed. So control of the group went to the person William felt was less likely to succeed, which was Gerard Phillips. And that's why I planned on having a scene like that where we showed this happen, where he basically just states, "I hate all of you, I don't care about all of you. You're all snakes. You're all terrible people, and I'm a terrible person too. So fuck all of you. This guy's in charge. So yeah, this of course is when all the stuff happened and films, but when all the different world taking over ventures were happening. But as the company quickly slipped into ruin, Phillips was poisoned by an unknown assailant and replaced by the next most highest ranking member, known to most as Mr. Rancher, known to us as Bad Rock. And bear in mind, this part of the backstory probably would have never actually come out. I probably would have just left that as so that I know exactly what happened, but everyone else doesn't really need to know. But now you know. Um, so yeah, now you might be asking, well, wait a second. So Chadwick was destined to be back in time, but like, so he created Panther? Is that what you're saying? Yes. Yes, and things sort of turn out cyclically when you're dealing with time travel in general. So the way I interpret it is that maybe in the unmolested timeline, what actually probably happened, because I actually plan on this being kind of ambiguous there, where people in the company itself, because when they ask about, because Chadwick and Marvin were named after the original founders of the company. That's what the scientist was going to say. And there was actually a bit of confusion on history there as to whether or not the place was called, if Chadwick and Marvin were brothers, or if they were father and son, or if they were something else, or even who was father and who was son. There's actually confusion in there. The reason they don't keep these records is because they're obviously a criminal organization. They're not going to. But it's left kind of ambiguous there. So perhaps in the unmolested storyline, there was a couple of brothers called Chadwick and Marvin Jones who just totally unrelated, who set up something like this. We know William Jones is a person, but he would be what, 1/8 Saiyan? It's so diluted it'd be hard to tell if he was a Saiyan or not. So William Jones is probably could have been somebody else's kid. This stuff sort of melds together. That's the thing. I'm just saying in the storyline as presented, that's how it would have been. That time travel shenanigans both create it's like Homer Simpson's line about beer. It's the beer, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. That's time travel as well in this universe. So, if Chadwick Jones wasn't dead before, I'm pretty sure I just killed it there. I spoiled literally everything. If I were to try and continue it now, I'd have to come up with something else, and I ain't doing that. So, rip Chadwick Jones, rip Don Macaroni, who dies in either timeline. So sad. And yeah. Hope you thought this was interesting. Might talk about some of those movies at some other point. Might use some of these story ideas and some other things. I don't know. But thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in on Friday. Friday afternoon, I'm going to be having a commentary discussion with Miscellaneous over his / my review of Snow Beast, where he played Chadwick Jones and reviewed Snow Beast. So it's sort of his counterpart to my where I impersonated him and reviewed Thunderpants. So we'll be talking about that this Friday. So be sure to tune in for that. Nobody's watching right now, but for those of you watching the replay, thanks for watching, and talk to you some other time. And ending it now.